details.
Guns, guns, and more guns. That's right, folks. U.S. Money Shops has just received a large shipment of pre-owned Glock 22s, 23s, and the awesome Beretta 8040D Cougar. These guns are law enforcement trade-ins that start at just $379.99 while supplies last. At U.S. Money Shops, there's no shortage of guns, so if you're looking for a great deal on a newer pre-owned gun, then check us out first.
Buy or sell or apply today. The better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Visit usmoneyshops.com for the location nearest you.
Welcome back to Listen In with David Davis and Angela Minor. For this hour, we are honored to have as our guests Democratic State Executive Committeeman Jim Bilbo and Democratic State Executive Committee woman Sally Love. Welcome to both of you.
Good morning, Angela. How are you?
Oh, terrific, Jim. Thank you. Since you jumped in there, let's start with Jim. For the three people in the county who don't know you, give us a little background. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, I'm an attorney here in Cleveland and have been practicing since 1985. Grew up here in Cleveland, actually born in the great state of Mississippi. My parents moved here when I was very young. My dad was recruited to come in to build the institution that we know is now Lee University, but Lee College at the time. Graduated from, well, I didn't actually graduate, but I went to Cleveland High School, and I graduated from then Lee College, and moved to Nashville for a few years. And when my wife Missy and I were married and were thinking of a family, we moved back to Cleveland to raise our family, and have been living here ever since. And like you said, Angela, I am on the Tennessee Democratic Party State Executive Committee and have been honored to serve in that capacity since 1990. And I'll tell you a little bit more of that, I guess, as we go.
Excellent. Sally Love.
Good morning. My name's Sally Love. I also am an attorney. I practice with Chancey Canavas, Love and Painter at 121 Broad Street. Put in a plug there. 3 guys and a girl. And I live in Polk County, and I am the Democratic Executive Committee woman from McMinn, Monroe, Meigs, Bradley, and Polk County. They threw in another county for us, and I'm just beginning my second term, which is my 5th year beginning, and it's been an education.
Excellent. Before we get going, tell us a little bit, what is the form and function of a state executive committee?
The system is set up under state law for the Democrats and the Republicans. We're under the same law, and it's just the organization and the governing body of the particular political party. The state's divided up into districts, and each district has a female and a male representative to the executive committee, which is the governing body of each political party. And we're under the same rules, and basically we do the nuts and bolts of running the party statewide. We have an executive director who is the executive officer who's in charge of the day-to-day, but we meet periodically and make decisions about policy and procedure and running the party. One thing I did here recently is that I headed a committee regarding a contested primary election in Davidson County, and that is the statutory duty of the political parties to determine and make decisions about who's going to be the representative in a certain primary, and if there are irregularities, then the party makes a decision. It sort of sits as the judge and the jury and makes decisions as to whether or not this election was proper. And that was an education, too. It was sort of different, not something I do every day, but there was a contested election in the Davidson County in the criminal court judges race. The woman who lost challenged the election, and thank goodness our Supreme Court already had a decision and gave us a procedure and what to look at to determine whether or not if an election should be set aside. And there can be irregularities, but the irregularities have to be sufficient that they would have made a change in the outcome. In this particular case, there were 8 contested votes, and that was not enough either way to swing the election. But Robertson County in the 1970s had their whole election set aside, so the Supreme Court had already done its homework,
Right.
so we knew what to do.
Let me just add to that and piggyback on what Sally said. You know, basically the primary function of the Tennessee Democratic Party as an organization is to support Democratic candidates across the state of Tennessee, our standard bearers for all offices throughout the state. And that's the primary function. And what Sally is describing is our statutory function to serve as the state primary board, because we have a considerable amount of leeway by law, by statute, to determine how our primary elections are going to be conducted and determination of the winners. And we are an organization that is elected. A lot of folks don't even realize
Right,
that.
right.
But Sally and I both stand for election every 4 years in the August election prior to a gubernatorial election, and they're 4-year terms. In my particular instance, I was asked by then great Governor Ned Ray McWhorter to run for the committee, and couldn't say no to Ned Ray.
No,
and
certainly
so that's how I got my start, and have enjoyed serving the people of the 9th District since that time.
Excellent.
So, are you two ready to get to why we're here?
Oh, absolutely.
Let's rock and roll, Dave.
Okay, and we're going to be talking to the Democrats in the room about Amendment 1, which is concerns abortion, and Amendment 2 that concerns judicial selection, and we'll touch again on Amendment 3 that has to do with eliminating the personal income tax, and number 4 would be expanding the a lottery to veteran service organizations. So, can you give me an overview about what you think Amendment 1 would do?
Amendment 1, the purpose of Amendment 1 is to take away the right of privacy to a family's decision about abortion.
Sorry, we were having a
technical
issue.
difficulties.
Sorry about that,
That's
Sally.
all right.
I just need you to speak in.
All righty. The purpose of Amendment 1 is to remove the state's constitutional right of privacy when it comes to abortion.
And how would it do that?
Well, in the year 2000, our state Supreme Court issued an opinion in the case of Planned Parenthood versus Sundquist, and it involved at that time the state's law regarding abortion, and it placed some restrictions on on how to get an abortion. And the Supreme Court ruled, half and half. It eliminated the restrictions against abortion that were in that statute, and the Supreme Court said that our state constitution gives a woman a right of privacy, and that this right of privacy was even stronger than the right of privacy found in our federal constitution. And this law does eliminate the right to privacy. Now, I don't care what you think about abortion. You can be for it, you can be against it, you can be in the middle. That's fine, that's good. You have the absolute moral right to believe what you want to believe. this law takes away the right of privacy just on the issue of abortion. Now, traditionally, amendments to the Constitution have increased our freedoms. We have a constitutional amendment that takes away slavery. We have a constitutional amendment that gives 18-year-olds the right to vote. We have a constitutional amendment that gives women the right to vote. This amendment is very different in that it removes a right. And to me, this is very dangerous. I hate to say slippery slope, but I'm going to say slippery slope. The government should not be in the business of removing rights from the citizens of Tennessee. And the way the wording is kind of misleading. It says nothing in this Constitution secures or protects a right to abortion or requires the funding of an abortion. Well, that's true. There is no right to an abortion. There's a right to privacy. And there's nothing nowhere ever that gives anyone the right to funding of abortion. So this, to me, just sort of raises a red flag and sort of skews the whole amendment to say, well, hey, I'm against funding for abortion. I'm going to vote for this, and it's misleading, and I think deliberately so. But basically, the right of abortion is your individual. No, there is no right of abortion. Excuse me. The decision regarding an abortion is an individual decision, and it's something that our state legislature should not be making those decisions for you as an individual. Our Supreme Court has previously made quite a few decisions regarding the right to privacy in a child custody case, for example. But and we do have the right to privacy, and it's been in the news lately with the NSA and that controversy when your credit card information is hacked from Target or some other store. That's alarming because that is your private information, and everything these days is subject to scrutiny and everything's in the public. But we do have the right to privacy. You don't have to air everything in public.
Is this? Do you see this as an encroachment on the state Supreme Court or the judicial system, or?
Yes, I do. Just that, if you don't like a decision, we always our government always has the right. As we elect our officials, that if a decision comes down, you don't like it, well, you can tweak a law, you can change it, you can alter it to make it constitutional, to make it be appropriate. But this just kind of is like taking a dead fish and slapping you in the face with it. I can make a decision. You can make a decision about your family's life. You don't need these people in Nashville making decisions about very private things that go on in your family.
Do you have anything to add to that, Jim?
Well, I can add a lot, Dave.
Well,
and I do need to say some things because, we're here as representatives of the Tennessee Democratic Party in our duly elected positions. And, I need to preface my thoughts on Amendment 1 with the following. I'm pro-life. I am a Democrat, and I am as pro-life as anybody that I know. And my family, my household, we are all pro-life individuals. This amendment, is not really appropriate for an amendment to the Constitution of the state of Tennessee. You know, it states something, and if you read the content, and the voters, when they go to the voting polls in November, they'll have a chance to read and the language of the proposed amendment, and it says nothing in this Constitution, referring to the Tennessee Constitution, secures or protects the right to abortion or requires the funding of an abortion. That's a correct statement, but it's not proper to put that in the Constitution. It is a correct statement. There is nothing in the Tennessee Constitution that protects the right or requires funding of an abortion. And the next sentence is the thing that some polling data that has been conducted causes some folks some problems with this amendment. The people retain the right through their elected state representatives and state senators to enact, amend, or repeal statutes regarding abortion, including but not limited to circumstances of pregnancy resulting from rape or incest, or when necessary to save the life of the mother. Well, it refers to, basically what this is saying is, you know, we want to enhance the power of the Tennessee legislature. The problem, according to polling data that has been done, and I read one poll out of Vanderbilt University of citizens of the state of Tennessee, they don't have great trust, they don't have great confidence in the Tennessee legislature. They don't have, you know, they don't really want to give more power to the state representatives and state senators of the state of Tennessee. So they got, so that language causes some difficulty in the potential of passage of this amendment. But there again, the second sentence of this language basically states what is already the situation. It doesn't really do anything. This amendment doesn't do anything other than, respectfully political grandstanding, and does nothing else essentially other than that. And the polling data that I have read, and there are a couple of polls that I have seen, and both of them indicate that the amendment may be in trouble. And if you do the breakdown of the polling data, there are segments of people who think that abortion ought to be okay in every circumstance. You have people who believe that abortion should be okay only in case of rape, incest, or to save the life of the mother. And you have other people that say that it should not be allowed at any point in time. You have folks who say it should be criminalized. They're wide opinions of the voters across the state of Tennessee and across the great United States, for that matter. But the problem is, I think that folks just don't want to give the legislature any more power than they already have, and that's why this amendment may well be in trouble, according to that polling data.
So it sounds like you might be saying that it's a way to continue abortion in the state of Tennessee as a divisive issue? Absolutely no question about that. No question about that. It's one of those wedge issues. It's a political football, and if you say, the labels, the anecdotal sayings, about being pro-life, pro-choice, pro-tax, bigger government, those kinds of things, quite frankly, those of us who work as officials in the Tennessee Democratic Party, and in fact folks who work closely with the Tennessee legislature and government at all levels, understand that those things are just made up issues for the purpose of getting folks elected, and folks ought to educate themselves by reading up on things. And let me give you some examples of that. Folks incorrectly assign being pro-life with the Republican Party. I'm a Democrat, I'm pro-life. There are a substantial number of members of the Democratic Party who are firmly pro-life. There is a substantial number of the individuals in the Republican Party who favor abortion. There are a number of people in the Republican Party who favor abortion. Look at the congressman, the Republican congressman who represents a portion of Bradley County right now, and the things in his background, if you want an example of that. That's one of many examples that I could give. There have even been some surveys that have been performed on folks who are attending the Democratic National Convention and the Republican National Convention, and as much as 25 to 30% of Republicans identify themselves as being pro-choice. Okay, all right. So and the reality is this: read the incident of abortion. And you know, I think that what we should really focus on, if we're sincere about curtailing abortion, then we really ought to think about, well, what can we do to avoid it from happening? Well, you know, if you look at the number of abortions that occur when Democrats are in office, and you look at the number of abortions that occur when Republicans are in office historically, according to the figures that I have seen, there are fewer abortions when Democrats are in office.
Why?
It's economic issues, plain and simple. You know, it all relates to money. You know, economic times are better. In our recent memory, let's think about, you know, when have we experienced the greatest economic prosperity in the last few years?
Under President Clinton.
There is absolutely no question about that. Under President Clinton and Vice President Al Gore, who's been demonized, you know, this is another point of contention that we have. Al Gore is a fine man. You know, he really is, and he's been demonized by individuals and quite frankly the media to the point where you know, he's represented different than he is. He did a very good job. Bill Clinton did a very good job. And we had the greatest period of economic prosperity when they were the president and vice president of any time in recent history, and it is because of Democratic principles. And quite frankly, you know, the Democratic principle is the Democratic Party. Make no mistake about this. The Democratic Party is the party of the working men and women of our country and of our state and of our county and community here in Cleveland. We represent the working people. We don't represent the big corporations. We don't represent big business. We don't represent the insurance industry. You know, when folks make a living wage and they're able to support their family, then life is better for everyone. A rising tide raises all boats. And that has been proven again and again and again. And if folks would just look at the historical context, you know what? And I was born in Mississippi, and I remember an old saying that used to go on down in Mississippi. You know, we hate to see when Republicans are in office because we get tired of eating rabbit stew all the time. You know, this principle has existed for a longest time. And getting back to where we started out, yeah, you know, wedge issues have tricked a lot of people, have peeled a lot of people off. And you know, they've fallen for those tricks.
Well, there's certain words that just evoke emotion, and abortion is one of those.
Absolutely, and that's the whole purpose of this statute is to either stop abortion or make it more difficult. But there are lots of ways to stop abortion. One is good health care. 2 is a good economy. 3 is responsible personal behavior, birth control, for example. And there are lots of ways to be against abortion. I don't know one single person who is pro-abortion.
Amen.
Amen. You know, abortion is a horrible, horrible thing. But President Clinton said that abortion should be legal and rare. There are times when an individual does choose abortion, and it's not like picking out a new pair of shoes or picking out a set of tires. It's a horrible, horrible decision to make. There's rape, there's incest, it's a life and death decision. But it is your decision to make. It is not the people who sit in the state Senate and in the state House of Representatives. It is an individual decision to make in the privacy of your home and your conscience.
So is this the difference that the GOP is wrapping it up as a moral issue, and you're trying to look at it as a political issue.
Well, it's a legal issue. It's and well, in politics encompasses everything, unfortunately, but it's a legal issue. It is a right of privacy. It is, it's not any of my business what you decide. It's an individual's decision, and people, the government should stay out of this very personal decision.
Okay.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. What I heard you say, both of you say, is the entire first sentence is of no use because it's simply pointing out what is already true.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's already just the facts is
sort of meaningless to put it there, is what
absolutely.
I heard you say. And the second part is we are imbuing this right to legislators to make these decisions. Is that the danger part? I mean, is that what I've heard you say?
Well, they already our state legislators already have the power to make laws regulating abortion under the parameters set out by our Constitution and the decisions set down by the Supreme Court. But but the real thing about this amendment is that not what it's not what it says so much as what it does, and the wording is very misleading because the intent of this legislation, of this amendment, is to remove the right of privacy that our state Supreme Court said that our state Constitution gives an individual when it comes to making a decision about abortion. And that's the wording is horrible. It should just come out and say there is no right to privacy in abortion, period. And it's sort of like it's advertising. It's false advertising.
Whoop FM.
Do we have a phone call?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have heard that the decision, Planned Parenthood of Middle Tennessee v. Sunquist in 2000 was the linchpin motivator to begin this amendment. Can you
That is correct.
explain why that is so? Why?
Well, because in that decision, our state Supreme Court said that our state Constitution gives our citizens the right to privacy when it comes to abortion. And since that time, elected officials and other people have tried to come up with legislation and an amendment to change that. And after the Republicans took control of our House and our state Senate, that's when it happened. Now, it is very difficult to get an amendment. It has to pass 3 readings in 2 different sessions. And it happened in 2009, it happened in 2011, and it passed those 2 different sessions.
Can I put you on hold?
And now
for just a minute?
it's on our ballot.
If you'll
But
ask
the wording
questions,
is
succinctly,
very misleading.
Then, right. Okay. Okay.
Well, the phrase I've heard, Sally,
Back
just
here. Bye-bye.
relative to what we were just talking about, the phrase I heard is legislating from the bench. Would either of you like to address that? I know as attorneys, let's
You can't
address
keep us
this.
quiet on that one, Angela.
That is such a red
Please.
flag. People will say it when the court comes up with a decision they don't like. But if it's a decision they like, then hey, it's okay. But and it's used by both sides, the left, the right. It's just it's the red flag in front of the bull, and there's nothing wrong. There was one state senator here last year or so who wanted a law that says that our courts couldn't decide if a law was constitutional or not. Now, this is a horrible law. Is a horrible senator to come up with something that senator must have missed civics in the 7th grade. But anyway, there's nothing wrong, and it's perfectly appropriate. This is what courts do. They decide if a law meets constitutional muster or not, and they can also give guidelines and how you come about this decision, and it helps all of us. It helps attorneys, it helps judges, and it helps our citizens to know A, B, and C. What are we looking at? How do we do this? I just mentioned the Robertson County decision from the 1970s that gave the steps. What do you look for when you're trying to figure out if a primary election should be set aside? This is what they're supposed to do, and this is what our court did.
We just went through in the August election a yes/no retention vote, which is called the Modified Missouri Plan, which has been approved over and over again. Maybe this is a segue into Amendment 2 of the 4. But, folks, Sally and I understand, because we work in the judiciary system all of the time. We're there all of the time. Judges are elected, and their sworn and solemn duty is to uphold the constitutions of the state of Tennessee and of the United States. They check their own political ideology at the door. Their political ideology has absolutely nothing to do with making a decision. They make their decisions based on the facts and the law. And, this legislating for the bench is one of those other inflammatory type of statements that gets people all riled up when they hear that kind of thing. But, it should not make a difference. My preference would be that all judges would be elected on a nonpartisan basis. Politics doesn't make any difference. If you are a Republican and you go in front of a Democratic judge, should that bother you? Absolutely not. You should be you should have confidence that this judge is going to make a ruling based on the law and based on the facts, and political ideology has absolutely nothing to do with it. We have some very good judges in our judicial district here, and our appellate judges and our Court of Appeals judges all do a great job. So, legislating from the bench, the political ideology of a judge has, that is a non-issue. And it's a problem, a perceived problem that does not and has never existed.
And that is a perfect segue into Amendment 2. Mm-hmm. And my understanding, just briefly, is that this will change to allow the governor to appoint Supreme Court and other state appellate court.
No, it doesn't change it. It just kind of constitutionalizes what we've sort of been doing anyway.
Okay.
This is a good amendment. You've got Governor Bredesen and Fred Thompson going around together supporting this piece of legislation. They've written op-eds for newspapers. They go on TV programs and appear at different functions.
Well, there's an example of bipartisanship.
Absolutely. It is a bipartisan issue. It's the main thing is that we don't want that other states have gotten themselves into a pickle, is contested judicial elections for the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals. And it is perfectly horrible. And even John Grisham, one of my favorite authors for a good read in a short time, has even written about it in one of his books. The dangers of contested elections, which bring in special interests, and with special interests you have money. For example, let's say some big company knows that it's got a case in the pipeline, and so it wants to make sure that the courts rule in its favor. So they're going to put a lot of money into finding a candidate who's going to be favorable to them, or giving money to a candidate so that when he or she comes on the bench and says, well, hey, I can't vote against this person because they gave me a couple of $100,000. So basically, we don't want people buying justice. Nothing is, to me, is more infuriating when people come to me and say, well, the other side's got money, or the other side knows the judge. And it's really a disservice to our legal system, because even though it's not perfect, we're made up of human beings, but we strive to be impartial and strive to do our job, to interpret and apply the law, regardless of your background or whether or not you think you know someone and have influence. When someone says, oh, he knows the judge, well, a good judge will recuse himself or herself and not hear the case. But the idea is to have an impartial judicial system, and that's not influenced by special interests or money.
Amendment 2 is a good thing. I agree with that. It has to do with a merit selection process of our appellate court judges. If you went around and you started asking folks on the street, can you name any of the Tennessee Supreme Court justices?
The answer would be resoundingly no, I'm afraid.
Yeah, any of the Court of Appeals judges, can you name any of them? The majority of folks absolutely could not. So what would they base their vote for those individuals on? It shouldn't be based strictly on political party ideology, because the judges are sworn to check their ideology at the door, and that has no place in making their decisions.
Or final week television commercials.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
Yes. So, basically, what Sally is absolutely correct. We've had the modified Missouri Plan selection process for a number of years. We have the blue ribbon panel that vets candidates. They examine their writing samples. They examine decisions that they have made, and they make recommendations to the governor. And the governor would then select. Right now, the way that it works is the governor selects the appellate court judges, which would be Court of Appeals, Court of Criminal Appeals, and Tennessee Supreme Court. So, whoever the governor is the one who's going to make those selections. This Amendment 2 will add another provision that it will be subject to also some confirmation by the Tennessee legislature as a little added bonus.
Yeah, this law is sort of I guess, Tennessee's version of the federal procedure to fill seats on the federal courts. Although this amendment will take away the Judicial Selection Commission, which is a part of our current procedure that I really, really like, and that's the vetting procedure that Jim just told about. You have the candidates have to turn in their financial records. There's a TBI background check. There are public hearings. It's a remarkable procedure, and the commission is made up of attorneys and citizens from all phases of life here in Tennessee, and it's a wonderful way to look at the possible candidates, and if the governor doesn't like any of the three candidates the commission puts before it, then they come up with some more. But it's a very participatory type of procedure, and in elections, you don't know what a judge has written or not written, or a candidate for judicial position has done, and it's a wonderful way to scrutinize the candidates.
Well, not to take anything away from the average voter, but most of them don't know where to get the information to make a good judgment.
Absolutely, and that was you saw that in the most recent election about retaining our judges. You had the selection to retain or judge or not. And lots of people saw the selection of not retain and given the general feeling about government, and people don't like our elected officials, they said, well, hey, I can get rid of the bums and put that check, even though these people have no idea who the judges are, what decisions they made. They've never been into a courtroom. And so one of our big problems in this election and every election is voters have to inform themselves. As a good citizen, you have to be informed and get your news from different sources, and maybe doing a little investigation on your own to find out what kind of candidate is running and who you want to vote for.
Sure. Some folks may want to know, some of the listeners may be interested in why it's necessary to have Amendment 2, and we do support Amendment 2. Sally and I both do. And the reason that it's an amendment is because the Tennessee Constitution right now says that the judges shall be elected. So the question has been, is a yes-no retention election an election? And the Attorney General of the state of Tennessee on multiple occasions has said, yes, it is an election. There have been Supreme Court challenges, mainly made by John J. Hooker to challenge the constitutionality of it. And repeatedly, the Supreme Court has said, special Supreme Court, not the sitting members, but special Supreme Court have determined that, yes, it was. So, I don't know. You could debate whether or not it's necessary to do that. But the fact is, we still support it and think it's a good amendment.
That is correct.
Okay, I need to go back to Amendment 1 for just a minute. We had a caller a while ago who asked if you would explain how the amendment would take away from the Constitution.
Well, because of what it says. Nothing in this Constitution secures or protects a right of abortion or requires the funding of abortion. That is correct. But what this sentence says, what it means, is you have to go back and do a little research and read Planned Parenthood of Middle Tennessee versus Sundquist. This amendment is aimed at negating or voiding that Supreme Court decision.
And what does the Constitution say?
Our Constitution, we have a right of privacy. Not everything is spelled out. Not all of our rights are spelled out, but we have a right to privacy. And this is what this amendment attempts to do, is remove your right of privacy when it comes to the abortion decision.
Okay. Want to go to Amendment number 3?
Yes.
Sure. Amendment number 3, and all this amendment is doing is to constitutionalize our current law. Our current law in Tennessee states that we have no general state income tax. Sometimes people say, well, we have no income tax. Wrong. We do have an income tax. It's called the Hall tax, and there is an income tax on dividends from stocks and interest on certain bonds. Not everyone has this kind of income. If you don't have this kind of income, then you don't know about the tax. But sometimes you'll have income from dividends, and there's a 6% rate on taxes on that income. Our current law is that should the state legislature so decide, they could enact an income tax. And several years ago we had a very ugly, very heated confrontational session regarding the income tax under Governor Sundquist. But currently there is no general state income tax in Tennessee, and this would just put it into our Constitution. Now, nobody likes to pay taxes. I sure don't like to pay taxes, but of course I do. This amendment will probably most likely pass, although I think in terms of from a legal aspect, I think it's not a good amendment, because I think that your state legislature should have options. The public should have options. For example, what if something horrible, catastrophic happens, such as a tsunami or Katrina or something on that catastrophic level, and the government needed money for relief funds, and you need to keep your options open. And also there's the bigger issue, which we're really not really addressing, in my opinion, is that we have a skewed, whopper-sided tax system, and you do hear arguments about the 1% and the 97% or whatever, and how the super rich perhaps are not paying their fair share of taxes. There needs to be some revision of our tax code, but this law just basically kind of slams the door, would make tax reform, I think, a little bit more difficult to achieve.
Sally's right. I guess one of the impetus, and this is one of the other issues, that has been used to inflame voters, is talk about income tax. And there was an effort to pass an income tax, and it was led by Republican Governor Don Sundquist, and the folks overwhelmingly rejected that proposal. There were folks, Sally, you're right, folks driving around the Capitol building honking their horns. Radio personality Steve Gill heavily involved in that effort, and it was quite a scene there for some time. The thing that we as Democrats stand for is fundamental fairness in our tax system. Taxation is something that is a fact of life. We're always going to have taxes. You can debate, what are the essential services that government ought to be providing? Should the government be providing safe roads? Should our government be providing schools? Should we be providing quality education for the future of our country, our children? What do we need to spend our tax dollars on? And Democrats and Republicans have some differing opinions on those things. But we as Democrats believe that the tax system ought to be. Yeah, and Sally's right. Nobody wants to pay more taxes. I sure don't want to pay any more taxes. But whatever it is should be fair. The folks, the privileged class should not get a free ride. The tax burden should not rest on the working men and the women of our state of Tennessee. So it should be done in a fair way. I predict that this amendment will pass because nobody, and Sally and I and everybody in this room included, don't want to pay any more taxes. So we certainly go along with that. We might have some problems in the state. Sally's right. What happens? How can we predict what's going to happen in the future? There, could be some budgetary problems down the pike. And one or the other, we're talking about the political footballs and the wedge issues and the anecdotal sayings about the differences in political parties, and one of them is blaming Democrats for being tax and spend, raising your taxes and spend your tax dollar people. And reality is something different from that anecdote. We believe that it should be done responsibly. We believe that one of the functions of government, at least a substantial number of Democrats that I know and communicate with, believe that one of the functions of government would be to provide quality education. One of the things that's happening across the country and largely led by Republicans, and they're Democrats as well, so I'm not going to say this is one party or the other, is taking away from public education, and giving to private, out of state in many cases, private business interest. I am vehemently against taking our tax money and sending it to private companies out of the state of Tennessee to provide private schools within the state of Tennessee.
Amen.
That doesn't need to go on. I think that's irresponsible of our government, and I think that all of the taxpayers are against that kind of thing.
And that meaning charter schools?
Well, yes, charter schools, vouchers, and the private companies that run them. I read recently that in the state of Florida, it was determined that vouchers were determined to be unconstitutional as it was written in the laws of the state of Florida. And the basic reason, it might happen, there may be a challenge in the state of Tennessee, I don't know. But the basic reason is, it's not constitutionally appropriate to take taxpayer money and shift it to private business interests like that, and not provide an equal quality education for all of the children of the state. And that's the fear and the danger of the charter schools and the voucher programs.
Okay, you wanna move to amendment number 4 right quick?
We will.
Absolutely. This one empowers the legislature to permit lotteries for events that benefit nonprofits and veterans organization.
So it's fairly benign.
Yes.
Amendment.
Just if your local charity or your AMVETS or somebody want to have a fundraiser, the state legislature can enact some laws that say, hey, these folks can have lotteries to raise money for their charitable aims and goals.
Is the purpose just to include the 501c19s? Is that?
Yeah, well, it's nonprofits, 501c3, and then the other one
19s
is
or
19
vets.
is your vets
Yeah.
veterans organization.
Well, 501c3s are already have that option. It's expanding it to 501c19.
Right.
Okay, well, we're at 5 minutes to 11. Do you have anything to add that you forgot to say, or are we done?
Final comments, thoughts? We appreciate both of you being here.
Oh,
Well, thank you, Angela, and
Thank
thank you, Dave. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much, and I really commend you for putting on this series of programs to help educate the public about what is on our ballot, and to give everybody an opportunity to hear different viewpoints. Now it's up to the voter to do a little bit of homework and do some thinking and make a responsible choice.
But again, irregardless of your political affiliation or your philosophy or whatever, if you're an American citizen, you need to register to vote, and then you need to vote.
Absolutely.
It would be good to see this November have a record turnout of voters, because these are 4 very important issues.
Right. It takes, in order for these amendments to pass, the vote for has to be, it's counted this way: 50% of the +1 of the people who vote in the governor's race. So if 3,000 people vote in the governor's race, then it takes 150,001 for any of these amendments to pass.
The last day to register for this election cycle is October the 6th.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you both for being here. You're welcome back anytime.
Oh, and we'll not be here next Thursday because of Mark Grissom's Whoopathon, but we'll be back on the 18th. And until then, we hope you keep listening in. Goodbye.
Ah, the sounds of summer. If you had a pool, from Matthews Pool and Spa Company, 902 Sahara Drive in Cleveland, Tennessee. Call them at 423